investigate the most extraordinary event of the 20th century.
It's one small step for man.
Man landing on the moon.
One giant leap for mankind.
But believe it or not, it never happened.
This whole thing was a fake.
Decide for yourself as we explore the evidence.
The Eagle has landed.
Analyze official government photos.
What a ride, what a ride.
Examine the films.
The flag flaps on the moon where there's no atmosphere.
And hear the testimony of one former astronaut who's not afraid to speak his mind.
NASA could have covered it up.
Could the government have orchestrated the deception of the century? Did we land on the moon?
On July 16th, 1969, America held its breath.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Apollo 11 blasted into space, beginning its 250,000-mile journey to the moon. During their 8-day voyage, the Apollo 11 astronauts saw spectacular views of the Earth, floated in a weightless environment, and supposedly went where no man had gone before.
Guys looking good, down a half. Lights on, picking up some dust. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
But did it? Did they really land on the moon? Most of us think so. Millions of people watched on television as the lunar lander touched down, and these unforgettable words were spoken.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But even today, there are those who claim that believing in man's one small step requires one giant leap of faith. Bill Casing was an analyst and engineer at Rocketdyne, the company that designed the Apollo rockets.
There were many problems that evolved during the 60s that led people to believe that we're never going to make it to the moon.
Three decades ago, when the world watched Apollo's lunar landings, Bill Casing was watching too. But what he saw on television, combined with his experiences at Rocketdyne, made him a skeptic.
The whole thing then seemed phony to me. I think it was an intuitive feeling that what was being shown was not real.
As he studied the footage more closely, he was shocked to find several inconsistencies. Casing observed that despite the clarity of deep space, the stars were missing from the black lunar sky. He saw the American flag waving, even though there is no air on the moon. And he discovered that there was no blast crater beneath the lunar lander, where its powerful rocket engine had fired. This evidence convinced Casing that we never sent a man to the moon. As outlandish as it might seem, it has been estimated that as many as 20% of Americans believe we never went to the moon. But how could anyone think that one of the greatest moments in human history is a hoax? Is it really possible that NASA deceived the world? According to a former astronaut, it's entirely possible.
Regarding the Apollo mission, I can't say 100% for sure whether these men walked on the moon.
Brian O'Leary was a NASA astronaut in the 1960s and served as a science advisor during the Apollo moon missions.
It's possible that NASA could have covered it up just in order to cut corners and to be the first to allegedly go to the moon.
The chances of getting to the moon and returning safely to Earth were something like 0.0017%. In other words, virtually an impossibility.
What actually happened, in my mind, is that during the 60s, they said, if you can't make it, fake it.
But if the Apollo missions were fake, how was this monumental hoax accomplished? According to Casing, the launch of Apollo's Saturn V rocket was real. It just never sent astronauts to the moon.
The astronauts were launched with the Saturn V. Then, in order to account for their disappearance, they simply orbited the Earth for 8 days. And in the interim, they showed these fake pictures of the astronauts on the moon. But on the 8th day, the command capsule separated from the vehicle and descended to Earth, as of course was shown in films.
This theory inspired the 1978 movie Capricorn 1, in which the government attempts to fool the world by faking a mission to Mars.
We do not claim this planet in the name of America. We claim it in the name of all the people of the planet Earth.
The Apollo footage is strikingly similar to the scenes in Capricorn 1. Producer Paul Lazarus suggests that the film's plotline could be more fact than fiction.
I believe, had they wanted to, that NASA could indeed have pulled off the greatest hoax of all time, never sent anyone to the moon, and recreated it in a television studio. And I believe it could have been done at that time. The technology was in place.
The footing is solid. The surface seems powdery.
Surface is fine and powdery. I can pick it up loosely with my toe.
What we put up on the screen was our own simulated version of whatever we could do within a $4.8 million budget.
But with NASA's $40 billion budget, Casing believes they had the resources to pull off a hoax if they couldn't make it to the moon.
The reason I believe that NASA and the government faked the moon landing was basically it was technically impossible to do it. And they simply had to come up with some sort of alternative that they felt the public would believe.
Casing theorizes that the lunar landings were actually filmed in Nevada's high desert, at the top secret military base known as Area 51.
Area 51 is one of the most heavily guarded facilities in the United States. If you went in and tried to get some information, you could be shot and killed without any warning.
Russian spy satellite photos of Area 51 reveal not only a series of hangars that resemble movie sound stages, but also barren moon-like areas which coincidentally are covered with craters. Compare this photo of a lunar crater allegedly taken from the moon's orbit by Apollo 10 with this satellite photo of a crater at Area 51. Even astronauts acknowledge the similarity of the terrain.
It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States.
Could billions of people really have been fooled into thinking the Nevada desert was the moon? Casing believes it's possible, and maybe the real reason Area 51 is so heavily guarded.
This is a very secret base, and with good reason, because undoubtedly the moon sets are still there.
And if they are, no one's getting a look at them anytime soon. We've all been led to believe that on July 20th, 1969, the Lunar Excursion Module, also known as the LEM, carried American astronauts to the surface of the moon. But could it have simply been a prop lowered by wires onto a movie set? Bill Casing says that this may explain the absence of engine noise in the official NASA footage.
The noise level of a rocket engine is up into the 140, 150 decibel range. In other words, enormously loud. How would it be possible to hear astronauts' voices against the background of a running rocket engine?
Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
Is this evidence that the footage is actually fake? A sequence shot in a controlled environment here on Earth? Just months before this historic landing, a prototype LEM was flight tested at Ellington Air Force Base. While NASA cameras record the test flight, Neil Armstrong struggles to control the unwieldy craft. Then, at approximately 300 feet, the lander flies wildly out of control. At the last second, Armstrong ejects. And floats to safety. If the lander was so unstable and difficult to fly in the controlled environment of Earth, then how could the LEM land 6 times flawlessly in the alien environment of the moon?
The LEM had a single engine mounted dead center, and then they had little push jets, thruster jets, a couple of them up on top. This was supposed to control their attitude as they came down. Well, I'll tell you a secret. The instant you moved your tail in that cabin an inch, you would change the load pattern, it would begin to tilt, and it would start that thing spinning.
The surface appears to be very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder.
To have a powerful rocket engine blast the surface of the moon, blasting away all of the dust, and then find footprints surrounding the lunar lander, that to me would be an impossibility.
Photo after photo reveals that the lunar surface surrounding the LEM is covered with footprints. But Casing says there's something even more difficult to explain.
The fact that there's no blast crater under the LEM is one of the most conclusive pieces of evidence that I find supporting the hoax.
In fact, no sign of a blast crater is visible for any of the 6 lunar landings. Yet NASA's own scientific illustrations clearly depict a blast crater.
Then there's one other point. If they had truly landed on the moon, this dust would have then descended on the lunar lander, on the foot pads, and we find not a trace of dust on the foot pads. When I discovered that alone, I said, no way am I looking at a lunar lander that landed on the moon.
Could it be that the LEM was just a prop on a giant lunar movie set?
When Armstrong said, that's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind, the footprint that he made could have easily been made in Area 51.
Quality base here.
If the lunar module landed with 10,000 pounds of thrust, why is there no blast crater? Plus, was this footprint really made on the moon?
Casing points out that the LEM's departure from the lunar surface is even more suspicious.
In the footage of the ascent stage going up, what you don't see is an exhaust plume coming out of the rocket engine nozzle.
What a ride, what a ride.
But what do we see? We see the ascent stage suddenly pop up without any exhaust plume whatsoever, as though it were jerked up by a cable.
Is this evidence of a conspiracy? Was the government capable of such a massive cover-up?
I would say that my conviction that Apollo was a fake was really not according to one specific piece of evidence, but it was cumulative. This whole thing was a fake.